Hello and a very warm welcome. Your top global stories. First up, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis apologized for any responsibility the Greek government had for the deadliest train crash in the country's history. But in the aftermath of the train crash, protests have now turned violent. These are the streets of Athens. Glimpses of riot police among smoke and flares. Tear gas grenades being launched. Protesters clashing with the riot police, even as firefighters extinguish fire at various spots. All this following public uproar over Tuesday's train crash which killed 57 people, most of them being students. The protest was attended by about 12,000 people, according to authorities. 5 people were arrested and 7 police officers were injured when a group of more than 200 masked, black-clad individuals started throwing pieces of marble, rocks, bottles and firebombs at the riot police. Police at the scene had to respond with tear gas and stun grenades and chase suspects along a central avenue in the city. Well, now the collision at Tempe, about 380 kilometers north of Athens, shocked the nation and highlighted safety shortcomings in the small but dated rail network. More than 50 people are still missing. Stress and anxiety levels are peaking as rescue work continues. Now, the train was carrying more than 350 people and was full of students heading back home after a carnival break. It collided head-on with a cargo train near the city of Larissa just before midnight on Tuesday. And not just in Athens. 2 protest rallies against the state of Greek railways were held in the northern city of Thessaloniki as well. Meanwhile, hundreds of faithful gathered in front of the Apostolic Palace, where the Pope remembered and prayed for the victims of the train crash. Up next to Bangladesh, where a massive fire destroyed thousands of shelters in the world's largest refugee settlement. The blaze erupted during midday in the Rohingya camp number 11 in Cox's Bazar in the southeastern border district, which is the home for more than 1 million refugees. More than 2,000 shelters were burnt in the fire, and nearly 12,000 people have been rendered homeless. Most of them had fled from Myanmar after the 2017 military junta. At least 35 mosques and 21 learning centers for the refugees were also destroyed due to the fire. The fire quickly engulfed the shelters that were made of bamboo and tarpaulin. Fortunately, there are no reports of casualties as of now. Now, Bangladesh is one of the largest refugee settlements in the world, with nearly 1 million refugees residing in small and congested camps. The Cox's Bazar itself is densely populated. Over several decades, more than 1 million refugees from Myanmar have fled to Bangladesh, and more than 7 lakh have crossed borders after Myanmar's military initiated a brutal crackdown on refugees in 2017. The Rohingya camps in Bangladesh are prone to these fire incidents. At least 15 people were killed and nearly 50,000 were displaced after a fire engulfed an entire block back in 2021. As per Bangladesh Defense Ministry reports released last month, 222 fire incidents were reported in these camps. Well, from Bangladesh on to Crotone in Italy now, where people gathered in large numbers in remembrance of the 71 lives that were lost due to a shipwreck off the coast of Calabria. A cross made from pieces of wood from the shipwreck itself was the head of the procession. The march in the small Italian beach town of Steccato di Cutro. The boat carrying people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran and other countries had set sail from the Turkish port of Izmir. All immigrants aboard the ship were on the move to seek better quality of life in Europe. Unfortunately, the vessel broke apart in rough waters in the Ionian Sea off Calabria's coast last Sunday. 80 people survived the shipwreck. The cross at the head of the march was made by artist Maurizio Gigli. The procession was also attended by the Archbishop of Croton and the Imam of the Qutro Mosque. Now, discounts for families and easier access to Northern Europe are some of the reasons that many Afghans are now taking a long route to Europe from Izmir in Turkey to the beaches in Calabria in Italy. This longer, more expensive route represents roughly 15% of the total migrant and refugee arrivals in Italy, and half of the people taking this route are Afghans. For an adult, the cost of the voyage from Turkey to Italy is about 8,000 euros, but it is very much reduced for children, making it popular among the families, and also explaining the large number of children killed in the shipwreck. Moving on. Malaysia has been battered by one of the worst floods in about a decade. Unusual torrential rainfall has resulted in the deadly floods, forcing more than 40,000 people to evacuate their homes across the 6 states in the country. And that's not all. At least 4 deaths have been confirmed by the police so far. Malaysia was hit by unusually heavy rainfall. People wading through knee-deep water, roads completely inundated, houses and vehicles submerged, and waterlogged houses and shops. People walking through the flood waters with their belongings on their shoulders as they were forced to evacuate their homes. Rescue operations continue in waterlogged areas, and workers are helping the trapped families. Johor is one of the worst affected areas. People have been shifted to schools that have been converted into relief centers where they have been provided with food, medicine, and clothes. Now, Malaysian Nature Society President Winston Chow said that these were the worst floods to hit Johor in over 5 decades since the year 1969. And floods are not unusual in Malaysia. Even the annual monsoon season lasts from November till March, and about 118,000 people were forced to flee their homes back in 2014. People also try to keep themselves prepared. Malaysians usually have at least one boat in every house for flood safety. But with every passing year, climate change and unpredictable weather have made predictions difficult. And it seems there won't be rainbows or sunshines on the other end, as the Met Department has warned that the rain could go on till the month of April. The situation has led to the rise of water level in 25 rivers across the nation, even as 102 landslides have been reported since November. Experts believe the floods are a result of fast deforestation and overdevelopment in several states. Moving on. In view of quote-unquote escalating threats from abroad, as described by outgoing Premier Li Keqiang, China has announced its biggest increase in its military budget in about 4 years. More significantly, the development comes 6 months after the country's president, Xi Jinping, locked in a historic 3rd term as the head of the Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army in October. China, which has the world's largest standing army and navy, will now be spending $225 billion on its defense this year. It will raise its defense spending to 7.2% in 2023 compared to 7.1% last year. In comparison with the United States, China's defense spending still pales the US, which has allotted over $800 billion for its military this year. And when it comes to science and technology, China has given a 2% boost in its budget to research and development. Overall, Chinese spending on R&D has risen from 2.1% to over 2.5% of the GDP over the past 5 years. Now, in view of how military tensions have ramped up between China and the United States over Taiwan, China's outgoing Premier Li Keqiang warned, quote-unquote, external attempts to suppress and contain China are escalating. Analysts say this was par for the course, as it indicates China's long-held position over Taiwan's status. This past year, China has built artificial islands in the contested South China Sea. It has conducted drills, air patrols, rapid deployment maneuvers, and even live fire exercises near Taiwan. And lastly, our climate watch story. Because after almost 20 years of negotiations, the United Nations member states have agreed on a legal framework to protect parts of the ocean that lie outside national boundaries. Well, amid cheers and a standing ovation from delegates in the room, who had not left the conference hall for 2 days, Rena Lee, president of the Intergovernmental Conference on Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, announced that the treaty has officially been agreed upon. And it was an emotional moment for the delegates.
Good evening-ish, ladies and gentlemen. The ship has reached the shore.
Well, more than 100 countries on Saturday completed the agreement, set to safeguard world's marine biodiversity. It's important to note that nearly 2/3 of the oceans lie outside national boundaries, also called the high seas. The United Nations meetings have been held with the aim of producing a unified agreement for the conservation and sustainable use of those vast marine ecosystems. Experts feel a global oceans treaty is needed to actually enforce the pledge to protect 30% of the planet's oceans as well as its land for conservation. The treaty will provide a legal framework for establishing vast marine protected areas called MPAs to protect against the loss of wildlife and share out the genetic resource of the high seas. It will also establish a conference of parties that will meet periodically. But is the treaty really a need of the hour? Why have many not heard of this? And why is it important to protect marine biodiversity? Well, take a look at this. Almost 2/3 of the world's ocean lie outside national boundaries. This is called the high seas. Currently, all countries can navigate, overfish, and carry out scientific research on the high seas practically at will. Only 1.2% of the high seas is protected, and with increasing reach of fishing and shipping vessels, the threat of deep-sea mining and new activities such as bioprospecting marine species means they are being threatened like never before. The treaty will look into immediately confronting overfishing and illegal fishing. Oceanic ecosystems produce half the oxygen we breathe, representing 95% of the planet's entire biosphere. It's imperative to protect oceans as they soak up carbon dioxide as the world's largest carbon sink. Yet, until now, only fragmented and loosely enforced rules have rendered this water area more susceptible to exploitation than coastal waters. Well, now the treaty is arguably one of the most important international negotiations, and still many in the public domain have never even heard of it. Needless to say, it's a real opportunity to make history with this particular treaty. And with that, it's an end on this edition of Around the World. For more incisive news analysis and cutting-edge documentaries, keep watching News 9. Thanks for watching.